It was a wedding that defied gods, reason, and nature. A union not born of love, but madness. A marriage so grotesque that even Rome, ancient capital of excess and spectacle, shuddered behind closed doors. In the year 67 AD, the most powerful man in the known world placed a wedding veil on a boy. A child. Stripped of his name. Stripped of his body. Draped in silk, forced to smile. His name was Sporus. He was not a queen. He was not a bride. He was a victim. This is not a tale of forbidden love. It is not romantic. It is not misunderstood. This is the story of how power corrupts not just nations, but bodies, souls, and identities. A story buried in the ashes of Nero's Rome. A story of pain, humiliation, and erasure. This is the story of Rome's most tragic groom, the boy Nero tried to turn into a queen. To understand the horror Sporus endured, we must first step into the mind of his tormentor. Nero Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus. Son of Agrippina. Heir to the Julio-Claudian dynasty. Crowned emperor at just 17. He began as a dream. Bright. Articulate. Handsome. Rome loved him. He handed out grain, abolished secret trials, and bathed in the glow of populist adoration. But the dream decayed. Like gilded fruit rotting from the inside, Nero's reign darkened, each year bleeding deeper into paranoia and cruelty. He murdered his mother, Agrippina, with calculated calm. He poisoned his stepbrother Britannicus. He divorced his first wife Octavia and had her executed. Then came the fire. In the summer of 64 AD, fire consumed the Eternal City. Half of Rome was reduced to ash. Whispers blamed Nero. Some claimed he watched from his tower, strumming his lyre, cloaked in theatrical robes. Whether he caused the inferno or simply used it to rebuild his palace, history remains uncertain. But Nero's soul had clearly caught flame. He no longer ruled as a prince of the people. He ruled as a god. And in that delusion, he reached for the dead. Poppaea Sabina. She had been everything to Nero. A mistress, then empress. Elegant. Calculating. Radiantly beautiful. A woman who knew how to control the most dangerous man in the world. And yet she died screaming. Some say he kicked her in a fit of rage while she was pregnant. Others whisper it was a calculated moment, born of suspicion or disappointment. Whatever the cause, Poppaea died beneath his roof. And with her, Nero's last tether to reality snapped. He mourned her with bizarre rituals. Embalmed her with spices. Kissed her corpse. Held funerals that bordered on insanity. But grief, in a man like Nero, could not be processed. It had to be controlled. Rewritten. Replaced. And so, in his wandering gaze across the palace halls, he found a boy. We do not know what Sporus's real name was. The Empire didn't bother to record it. What we know is what they told us. He was young, beautiful, and he looked just like her. Just like Poppaea. To Nero, that was enough. Sporus was a slave imperial household before Nero noticed him. He had no voice in what happened next. No advocate. No sanctuary. Nero saw a ghost and Sporus became its host. Nero ordered his castration. This wasn't the eunuch tradition of the East. It wasn't for a ceremony or music or diplomacy. It was personal. Sexual. Obsessive. It was a crime so intimate, so invasive, that Rome itself recoiled. And yet, no one stopped him. We do not know if it was done under anesthesia. We do not know how long Sporus screamed. We only know that after it was done, the boy did not return to his former life. He was clothed in Poppaea's dresses. Painted in her rouge. Jewels placed in his hair. Sandals wrapped around his feet. He was no longer a person but a replacement, a doll, a corpse reanimated through cruelty. And ready for the humiliation. They called it a wedding. The emperor stood at the altar in lavish ceremonial robes, smiling serenely, eyes fixed on his bride. But this was not a union of hearts. Not a celebration of love. This was theater. And the audience, was an empire. The boy standing before Nero, barely a teenager, skin powdered to a pale sheen, lips stained with crushed berries, was not a bride. He was Sporus, a castrated child groom, dressed in the image of Nero's dead wife. They say Nero kissed him on the steps of the Senate, calling him, "My Sabina," his beloved Poppaea resurrected. A priest gave blessings. Rings were exchanged. There was music, laughter, even tears. But they were not Sporus's. To Rome's elite, it was clear, the emperor had lost his grip on reality. But who would speak against him? Who would rise to defend the trembling boy in the silk gown? No one. Power, after all, makes cowards of even the boldest. And so, the mockery continued. In public, Nero paraded Sporus like a trophy, an icon of twisted nostalgia. But in private, the nightmare deepened. Each night, the boy was escorted to Nero's chamber, veiled and silent. Each morning, he emerged, eyes empty, lips unspoken. He was forced to dine as empress, recline as empress, speak as empress. Even Rome's historians, hardly known for sympathy, hinted at the horror. Suetonius wrote, "He castrated a boy and endeavored to make him a woman. He treated him as a spouse." Dio Cassius said, "Sporus, having lost his manhood, suffered to preserve a dead woman's shadow." And what did Sporus feel? We don't know. History did not ask. Rome did not care. But look closer. In every account, he is silent. That silence is not emptiness, it is erasure. A voice buried so deeply that all that remained was performance. This was not love. It was domination in its most intimate form. Rome was many things, brilliant, brutal, sophisticated. But it was not blind. The wedding of Nero and Sporus was whispered about in every bathhouse, every marketplace, every barracks and brothel. Some laughed, mocking Nero's madness. Others wept, knowing what that laughter cost the boy. Graffiti found in Pompeii shows crude sketches of Sporus in a bridal gown, held by Nero on a leash. Satirists wrote biting poems, allegories of a Rome ruled by ghosts and puppets. But none dared speak too loudly. Even those who scorned Nero the most stayed silent when Sporus walked by. Because to acknowledge Sporus was to confront what Nero had done, and what they had allowed. It was easier to laugh. Easier to pretend it was spectacle, and not suffering. By the year 68 AD, Nero's empire was cracking. Rebellions flared across the provinces. The Senate turned against him. The Praetorian Guard, the very men paid to protect him, abandoned their posts. In his final hours, Nero fled Rome and took refuge in a crumbling villa with a handful of loyal slaves. Among them was Sporus. He watched as the man who once ruled the world wept and begged for death. And then, with the help of a slave, Nero drove a dagger into his own throat. "What an artist dies in me!" he whispered, his last words. And Sporus? He lived. But surviving is not the same as being free. You might think Sporus was released after Nero's death, but instead, he became a symbol, a curiosity, a political token. He was taken in by Nymphidius Sabinus, a powerful Praetorian commander who fancied himself Nero's successor. Nymphidius declared Sporus his wife. The cycle began again. Then came Otho, one of Nero's old friends and briefly emperor. Otho too had once loved Poppaea. He took Sporus for himself, dressed him in familiar robes, and called him Sabina. Like a ghost trapped in a ritual, Sporus lived the same nightmare again and again. No choice. No escape. Only repetition. He had become Rome's most tragic echo. Finally came Vitellius. A cruel, gluttonous ruler who saw Sporus not as a victim, not as a person, but as a joke. He planned to stage a public show. A horror play reenacting Poppaea's death, using Sporus as the star. He would be beaten, mocked, and killed, for the delight of Rome's masses. But Sporus would not endure another performance. Before the spectacle could take place, he found a dagger. And ended it. No one mourned him. No poet wrote an ode. No temple held his ashes. His death passed with the same silence that had followed him in life. But in that silence, perhaps for the first time, Sporus was free. History remembers emperors. It remembers generals, traitors, and kings. But the story of Sporus is not one of greatness. It is one of survival, of identity stolen, of power misused. He was not a queen, not an empress, and not a spectacle. He was a boy, caught in the grip of a madman's grief. He became a mirror for Rome's cruelty. And when he was no longer useful, he was discarded. But if we speak his name now, if we tell his story, honestly and without varnish, he becomes something far greater than Nero ever imagined. He becomes remembered. Hit that subscribe button, uncover more truths like this one, unflinching, raw, and buried deep beneath time. Because remembering is an act of justice.